Tessa stood in the kitchen, rattling off last-minute instructions like I was the housekeeper, not her mother. The orchids need misting, not watering. Don't forget to set the alarm at night. And if the neighbor's cat tries to sneak in again, just shoo it. Her voice was sweet, clipped, efficient, like I was being entrusted with something important, but not important enough to join. Her husband, Mitchell, loaded the last suitcase into the car. Greece will be too much for you. Mom, he called over his shoulder. Not unkindly. The heat, the stairs, the walking. It's not easy over there, Tessa chimed in, echoing what they'd already said a dozen times. You deserve rest, not long-haul flights. We'll bring back photos and something from the islands. I nodded, smiled. Even. My suitcase stayed in the attic. Claire and Micah. My grandchildren barely looked up from their phones as they shuffled toward the van. Claire gave me a quick side hug. Micah offered a mumbled, "See ya." Grandma. I stood at the door, waving as they pulled out of the driveway, their laughter trailing behind the closed windows of their air-conditioned van. Tessa didn't turn around. The silence after they left was not unfamiliar. This house had learned to hold its breath between visits. I walked back inside. My footsteps softer than I remembered. I poured myself a cup of tea I didn't want and sat at the table, letting the steam rise without purpose. That's when I saw it. An envelope. Thick and white. Tucked under the fruit bowl. Not hidden. Just forgotten. I slid it out. Inside were their plane tickets, 4 of them. Still in the travel agency sleeve, still unstamped. Departure in 3 days. Destination Athens. Passengers Tessa Callahan, Mitchell Callahan, Claire Callahan, Micah Callahan. My name wasn't there. Of course. It wasn't. I read the names again, slower this time. Then I set the envelope down beside my tea and stared out the window. They didn't forget the tickets. They forgot I might notice. I made another cup of tea. This time, letting the bag steep longer than usual. The first one had gone cold beside the envelope. Untouched. My hands weren't steady. Not yet. I held the mug with both palms. Fingers curled around the heat, willing it to calm the small tremors dancing along my knuckles. I unfolded the tickets again. The print was sharp and unforgiving. 4 seats, row 12, aisle, window, middle, no extra. No, maybe you'll come. 2. Mom, no error to correct, just omission clean, deliberate. I opened the drawer where I kept my checkbook and documents. The travel agency receipt was there too, clipped to the back of the ticket envelope. A small note scribbled in Tessa's handwriting booked with Mom's card. Will reimburse. I almost laughed. They'd used the joint credit card I let her keep open for emergencies and for reward miles. I was the one who paid it off every month without complaint. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was what it always had been about access. They remembered me when it was convenient, when it benefited them. I set the mug down and picked up my phone. The screen lit up, ready and waiting. I opened the bank app. 2 transactions from the travel agency. 1 for flights, 1 for accommodations. No refund in sight. No discussion. I scrolled down, tapped the card details, and hovered over the option. Freeze card. I didn't flinch. I didn't call. I didn't warn. I tapped. Confirmed. The screen blinked once, then again. Card frozen. Access revoked. I placed the phone face down on the table, the mug beside it now half empty. Outside. The wind moved the branches gently against the glass. Inside. Everything was still. I stood. Walked to the drawer by the hallway and took out my old passport. It started with 1 call, Tessa. Then another. Then Mitchell. Then Tessa again. I watched the screen light up. Then go dark. Again and again. Like a child flicking a switch. Demanding attention without understanding what they're turning off and on. By the 15th minute, The numbers stacked higher than I cared to count. 18 missed calls, 45 messages, a few voicemails, most of them from Tessa, her tone tight and urgent, even in the previews. "Mom, are you home? We think we left something. Did you touch the tickets? Call me now? Are you okay?" They weren't asking if I was okay. They were asking if I had undone their plans. I didn't answer. Instead, I returned to the table and reopened the envelope. I flipped the ticket sleeve over. The booking confirmation was printed on the back. I copied the code down neatly into the margin of a notepad, tore off the page, and took it with me to the small study where the landline still lived. I dialed the airline and waited through the hold music. When the agent finally came on, her voice was brisk but polite. "Can I help you with your reservation?" "Yes," I said, reading out the code slowly. "I'd like to cancel these flights." "All 4 seats." "Yes." A pause. "May I ask why?" "No." Another pause. This one longer. "Understood." She processed the request in silence, then gave me a cancellation number. I wrote it beneath the confirmation code. "Is there anything else I can assist you with today?" "No, thank you." I hung up and returned to the kitchen. The tea had gone cold again. I didn't bother reheating it. I placed the notepad and envelope in a drawer, shut it, and turned back toward the hallway. The passport was still resting on the counter. I picked it up. My name looked strange under the official stamp, like someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I sat down in the rocker by the front window, the one I used to sit in when Tessa was a baby and the nights stretched longer than my patience. It creaked beneath me. Same as always. A little off rhythm, like an old song you haven't heard in years, but still know the words to. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't because everyone had left, it was because I had stopped trying to fill the silence. I let it settle around me like a blanket I didn't need to fold away. My eyes fell to the drawer across the room, the one I hadn't opened in years, the one I used to call the drawer for what-ifs. I stood slowly and crossed to it, inside my old passport. A stack of old postcards I never sent, and an itinerary from a trip Paul and I never took. Paris. It had said, but cancer rearranged everything. I picked up the passport. The corners were worn, the laminate yellowing slightly. I flipped to the photo, my hair darker, my eyes less lined, but the same woman. A woman who once wanted more than caregiving and quiet compliance. I checked the expiration date, still valid. Somehow, I sat back down with the passport in my lap. It felt heavier than it used to, like it had waited too long for me to notice it again. I ran my fingers across the raised lettering. I thought about all the trips I'd helped pay for, all the hotel stays I never booked for myself, all the miles I gave away. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up slowly. Hesitantly, I typed into the search bar. Flights from Portland. I didn't know where I wanted to go. Not exactly, but I knew it couldn't be somewhere familiar. I closed my eyes. Lisbon. I typed it. 1 passenger. 1 way. The search loaded. A list of prices. Departure times. Airline codes. I didn't flinch. I opened another tab and checked my bank account. I'd been careful all these years. No debt. A tidy sum in savings. A few small bonds I'd forgotten were still maturing. More than enough for 1 seat, 1 room, 1 beginning. I looked back at the passport on my lap. I was done being a background character in other people's itineraries. I booked the flight without hesitation. Lisbon. 1 seat. Aisle. No add-ons. No insurance. No seat selections for others. I clicked confirm and watched the screen refresh, as if it needed a moment to accept that I had really done it. The confirmation email arrived within seconds. I read it twice, not because I doubted it, but because it felt like proof. Not proof for anyone else, just for me. I printed the itinerary, folded it once, and slid it into the back of my passport. Something about paper still felt more real than a screen. The suitcase I pulled from the closet was small, with one broken zipper tab and a sticker from a garage sale still stuck on the handle. It was the one I always kept in case of emergencies. I smiled at the word, apparently. This counted. I packed lightly, comfortable shoes, a rain jacket, a change of clothes, and my navy dress, the one I hadn't worn since Paul's funeral. I hadn't been able to part with it, not because it reminded me of the loss, but because it reminded me of how sharply I stood that day, how still. I had held our family together with both hands while everyone else fell apart. That dress had structure, and for the first time in years, I wanted to feel that again. I added the silk scarf I used to wear when I was younger, when I still spoke in full opinions instead of careful suggestions. It was faded around the edges, but still soft, still mine. I tucked it between the folded layers like a secret. Toiletries, charger, passport, no makeup, just lip balm and the same comb I'd had for a decade. I walked to the kitchen and scribbled a note for Carol. My neighbor, Carol. I'm away for a little while. Could you water the front pots and check the mail? No emergencies. No worries, just something I need to do. Irma. I left it on her porch with the spare key tucked beneath the mat. She'd understand. Or maybe she wouldn't. It didn't matter. Back inside, I checked every room. Not because I was afraid of forgetting something, but out of habit. I paused at the hallway mirror. I looked at my reflection for a long time, not judging. Just acknowledging. My face didn't look older than yesterday, but it looked looser, like something inside had unclenched. I didn't text Tessa. I didn't call. I didn't know an explanation for leaving a place where no one had asked me to stay. When I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, it didn't feel like walking away. It felt like walking toward something I hadn't named yet. The suitcase rolled behind me, unsteady, but moving, just like me. Lisbon didn't greet me like family. It didn't ask where I'd been or what took me so long. It simply opened its streets and let me walk. From the airport to the guest house, I spoke little. The taxi driver chatted about the weather and soccer and how the sardines were best this time of year. I nodded, listened. That was enough. My room was small, clean, and full of unfamiliar air. No family photos. No fridge covered in grandchildren's art. Just space. I set the suitcase down and sat on the bed, letting the quiet stretch around me like something I hadn't known I missed. I didn't unpack. I changed my shoes, tied back my hair, and walked. The city met me with sloping alleys and chipped tile. Strangers passed with soft voices and slower steps. No one stared. No one smiled out of obligation. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like someone who needed a role to exist. I wandered until I reached a square, lined with orange trees and worn benches. A man was playing fado, his guitar worn, his voice older than him. The notes climbed into the sky, tangled with the breeze, then sank down into the stones beneath our feet. I sat and listened, not because I understood the lyrics, but because I didn't need to. The music filled the corners of me that had been dulled by years of being useful. It didn't try to fix anything. It just stayed with me, steady and unhurried. Afterward, I found a small cafe tucked beneath a balcony draped in drying laundry. I ordered olives, bread, and coffee. The waiter didn't ask where I was from. He just brought them over and left me alone. I ate slowly. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't think of the house. I didn't wonder what they were doing back home. For the first time, I wasn't being missed. And I didn't need to be. The message came sometime after sunset. I saw the preview on my screen as I set my phone down beside the bedside lamp. Tessa, this isn't funny. The kids are upset. Where are you? I didn't open it. There was no, are you all right? No, we're sorry. Just panic disguised as concern. A mother's absence suddenly inconvenient. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the open window. The shutters rattled gently in the night breeze. Somewhere in the distance, someone was singing again another song I didn't know, in a language I hadn't learned, yet somehow still familiar. They weren't afraid I was in trouble. They were afraid I'd stopped waiting for dinner invitations, for birthdays remembered, for apologies that never came. I turned the phone face down and reached for my scarf, folding it into a neat square and placing it atop the dresser. The navy dress hung from the back of a chair, its sleeves relaxed, as if it, too, had exhaled. As I got into bed, I found myself humming softly, absently, a tune Paul used to sing while shaving, a ridiculous little song about a man with too many socks and not enough shoes. I hadn't thought of it in years, but it came easily now, carried out of me without effort, and for the first time in a long while. The silence in the room didn't feel like something to fill. It felt like something that finally belonged to me. The next morning, I found a voicemail waiting. I hadn't heard the phone buzz. It must have come in overnight, slipped past the shutters like the breeze. It was from Claire. Grandma, I think I get it. I don't know everything, but I think I understand why you left. Mom says you're being dramatic, but I don't believe that. I miss you. I hope you're safe. Her voice cracked a little near the end. 16, trying not to cry. I played it twice, then once more. She hadn't asked where I was. She didn't need to. She just wanted to know I was all right, and to let me know that somewhere in all of this, someone saw me. Not as the problem, not as the background, just me. I stood on the balcony after breakfast, one hand on the railing, the other holding my coffee. Below, children chased pigeons through the square, their laughter bouncing off the cobblestones. The sun hit the tiled roofs in a way that made them look like old, open books. A breeze lifted the hem of my scarf. I closed my eyes, breathing it in, not trying to preserve the moment, just being in it. When I opened them again, I reached for my phone. I scrolled through my photos and found one I hadn't noticed before. Me, standing right here, looking out. Someone must have taken it from below. I wasn't posing, I wasn't smiling, but I looked calm, present. I sent it to Claire. No caption. A few minutes later, 3 dots blinked, then disappeared. Then came her reply. You look like you remembered something important. I didn't write back right away. I just sat there, holding the phone like a letter someone finally remembered to send. I met her near the fruit stall, both of us reaching for the last ripe fig. We laughed, then stepped back at the same time. Her name was Mireille, French, traveling alone, with short silver hair and eyes that had seen too much to pretend anymore. She asked if I liked music. I said I liked silence. But music was a close second. That evening, she knocked on my door with 2 paper tickets folded in her palm. A courtyard concert, not tourists, she promised. Just locals and rhythm and wine. I didn't need convincing. The venue was nothing more than an open square tucked between old buildings. Strings of warm light zigzagged above. A trio played from a raised wooden platform, their instruments worn and honest. People danced, not in pairs, not in sequence, just together, loose, alive. I stood at the edge, unsure. Mireille nudged me. It's not about knowing the steps. I hesitated, then reached into my bag, pulled out my scarf, and tied it in my hair, not around my neck. Not tucked away, it felt different up there, like a flag raised. And then I moved. Not gracefully, not to the beat, always. But I moved. Arms loose, hips unsure, feet remembering something they hadn't been allowed to do in years. Mireille joined me. We laughed. Not like women being watched, but like girls who'd been given back something they hadn't realized was missing. Later, we sat on the edge of the fountain, sweat cooling on our skin, catching our breath in comfortable silence. I wasn't trying to prove I could keep up. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just didn't want the night to end with stillness. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back. I didn't even tell Carol. The cab dropped me off just after noon. The lawn had grown a little wild along the edges, and the lavender by the porch was beginning to lean. But nothing was lost. Nothing was broken. The key still turned the same way it always had, inside. The house smelled faintly of dust and clean linen. The air was still, the kind of stillness that doesn't wait for company. My suitcase rested quietly by the door. I didn't unpack. The fridge was full. Carol, ever thoughtful, had stocked it with basics: milk, eggs, bread, a container of soup with her handwriting on the lid. Welcome home. If you're home. I stood in the middle of the kitchen and let the quiet wrap around me. Not as emptiness, not as punishment. Just presence. I didn't rush to fill it. I walked through the garden later, slowly, fingers brushing the tops of the rosemary bushes. The tomatoes were struggling, but the chard had exploded in my absence. I smiled. Things grow better when you leave them alone sometimes. I didn't check my phone right away. I didn't open the messages. Whatever they'd written could wait. Whatever they wanted wasn't more important than the stillness I'd brought home with me. That night, I made tea, sat by the window, and let the steam curl into the air. There was no noise, no list, no waiting for the next demand. For the first time, I wasn't someone waiting to be needed. I was just someone who had returned not to resume anything, but to begin again